The fundamental challenge in knot theory, a field initially spurred by Lord Kelvin's intriguing hypothesis of vortex atoms, lies in discerning whether two seemingly disparate knot diagrams represent the same underlying knot. Imagine a tangled length of rope, its twists and turns forming a complex configuration. We intuitively grasp the possibility of untangling this rope, of manipulating its form to reveal a simpler, perhaps even unknotted structure. But how can we formalize this intuitive understanding? How can we rigorously prove that two knot diagrams, which may appear vastly different at first glance, are in fact merely different representations of the same topological entity? This was the profound problem that confronted mathematicians in the early decades of the 20th century, a problem that lacked a robust mathematical framework for its resolution. Prior attempts relied heavily on visual inspection and cumbersome, inherently unreliable tabulation of knot types, a process prone to error and incapable of providing a comprehensive classification. Enter Kurt Reidemeister, a figure whose contributions extended far beyond knot theory, yet whose impact on this specific field proved nothing short of revolutionary. In the late 1920s, Reidemeister provided a decisive breakthrough, establishing a foundation upon which much of modern knot theory rests: the three Reidemeister moves. These moves, deceptively simple in their formulation, are local manipulations of knot diagrams that capture the essence of knot equivalence. His insight was to demonstrate that any two diagrams representing the same knot can be transformed into one another through a finite sequence of these three fundamental operations. This elegant solution transformed the seemingly intractable global problem of knot classification into a manageable algorithmic challenge. No longer was knot equivalence a matter of subjective visual comparison. It became a precise combinatorial problem susceptible to rigorous mathematical analysis. The first Reidemeister move involves introducing or removing a twist in a single strand of the knot. Imagine a single strand of the rope looping around itself, forming a small localized twist. This move allows us to either introduce such a twist or to remove it without altering the fundamental topological structure of the knot. The second move concerns the passage of one strand over or under another, a fundamental manipulation in transforming knot diagrams. A strand might pass over a crossing, or it might be moved to pass under. This move again preserves the underlying knot structure. Finally, the third move allows for the movement of a strand across a crossing point, essentially sliding one strand over or under another portion of the knot. This is a more complex maneuver, but crucially, it too leaves the underlying knot unchanged. The significance of Reidemeister's work lies not simply in the introduction of these three moves, but in his rigorous proof that they are both necessary and sufficient for knot equivalence. This means that if two knot diagrams represent the same knot, they can be transformed into each other using a finite sequence of these moves, and conversely, if two diagrams can be transformed into one another via these moves, they represent the same knot. This is a profound mathematical result, reducing the problem of knot equivalence to a finite sequence of elementary, well-defined operations. The combinatorial nature of Reidemeister's approach laid the groundwork for a more sophisticated treatment of knots, moving the field beyond its earlier reliance on visual intuition and into the realm of rigorous combinatorial analysis. The enduring legacy of Reidemeister's three moves extends far beyond their historical impact. Today they remain a cornerstone of knot theory education and research. Any function aiming to serve as a knot invariant, a quantity that remains unchanged under any transformation of the knot diagram that preserves the underlying knot structure, must necessarily be invariant under these three fundamental moves. This provides a crucial test for the validity of any proposed knot invariant. The development of powerful knot invariants, such as the Jones polynomial, stands as a testament to the enduring relevance of Reidemeister's work. These advanced invariants provide refined tools for distinguishing knots, yet their validity hinges on the fundamental principle established by Reidemeister, invariance under his three moves. The seemingly simple manipulations he described in the late 1920s continue to be indispensable for the development and verification of sophisticated mathematical tools used in modern knot theory. The transformation of a seemingly intractable problem into a concrete algorithmic challenge stands as a remarkable achievement, a testament to Reidemeister's mathematical ingenuity and its lasting significance. His work not only solved a critical problem, but also fundamentally reshaped the landscape of knot theory, providing a framework for future advancements and establishing a legacy that continues to inspire research to this day. The intellectual current that carried Kurt Reidemeister from the tangled diagrams of knots to the abstract architecture of group theory was both powerful and natural. His analysis of knot equivalence had revealed a profound truth. The geometric problem of deforming one loop into another was mirrored in the algebraic realm. The transformations of a knot diagram corresponded to formal manipulations, known as Tietze transformations, on the presentation of the knot's fundamental group. This insight illuminated a path forward. The study of knots, and indeed of many topological spaces, required a deeper, more computationally effective understanding of the algebraic objects associated with them. The challenge lay in developing the tools to navigate this algebraic landscape, to dissect these groups and understand their intricate internal economies. Reidemeister's work in this area would provide precisely that, moving from the visual and intuitive to the formal and algorithmic, and in doing so, forging some of the foundational instruments of combinatorial group theory. The central difficulty confronting mathematicians of the era was the problem of subgroups. In the early 20th century, groups were increasingly being defined by a finite presentation, a concise and powerful notation specifying a set of generators and the relational equations they must satisfy. This method could capture the essence of vast, often infinite structures. Yet, this conciseness came at the price of transparency. Given a presentation for a group G and a subgroup H of finite index within it, obtaining a presentation for H itself was a formidable, often insurmountable, task. The question was far from academic. In the burgeoning field of algebraic topology, the fundamental group of a covering space is always a subgroup of the fundamental group of the base space. To understand the topology of these related spaces, one needed a way to describe their associated groups. While the Nielsen-Schreier theorem had established that any subgroup of a free group is itself free, a general computational method for more complex, finitely presented groups remained elusive. An algorithmic bridge was needed to cross from the known structure of a group to the unknown structure of its parts. The solution emerged from a landmark collaboration between Reidemeister and the gifted young mathematician Otto Schreier. Together they formulated what is now known as the Reidemeister-Schreier method, a powerful and explicit algorithm for deriving a presentation of a subgroup of finite index. The method is a masterpiece of constructive mathematics, transforming a question of abstract existence into a sequence of concrete, though potentially arduous, computational steps. The procedure begins with the selection of a transversal, which is a specific set of elements from the parent group G, with each element representing one of the distinct right cosets of the subgroup H. These representatives serve as coordinates, providing a systematic way to label the distinct partitions of G created by the subgroup H. With these coordinates established, one constructs a remarkable object, the Schreier coset graph. The vertices of this graph are the cosets themselves. Its directed edges are labeled by the generators of the parent group G. An edge labeled with a generator, say little g, connects a vertex representing the coset h kex to the vertex representing the coset h kex. The resulting diagram is a complete map of the action of G's generators on the landscape of H cosets. It visualizes the internal dynamics of the group, showing precisely how the larger structure permutes the components defined by the subgroup. This graph, a combinatorial object of vertices and edges, holds the algebraic key. Within this graph, one identifies a spanning tree, a minimal set of edges that connects all vertices without forming any cycles. This tree represents a canonical non-redundant set of pathways between the cosets. The generators of the subgroup H are then revealed by the edges of the coset graph that are not part of this chosen spanning tree. Each such edge corresponds to an element of H, a loop that begins and ends within the same coset after being traced through the larger group. Formally, for each generator G of the parent group and each coset representative U, the element given by the product of U, G, and the inverse of the representative of the resulting coset, U, is an element of the subgroup H. The set of all such elements, derived systematically from the graph, forms a generating set for H. Following this, the relations for H are derived by taking each defining relation of the parent group G, tracing its path through the coset graph, and expressing the resulting loop in terms of the newly found generators of H. The entire process provides a deterministic machine for translating a presentation of a group into a presentation for one of its subgroups. The impact of this method was immediate and profound. It furnished the mathematical community with a computational engine of unprecedented power for exploring group structures, questions that were previously approachable only through abstract existence arguments could now be settled by direct calculation. For topologists, it meant that the fundamental groups of three manifolds, which often arise as subgroups of more easily described groups, could be explicitly computed and therefore studied in greater detail. The Reidemeister-Schreier method became, and remains, a cornerstone of combinatorial and computational group theory. It is a standard component of graduate education in algebra and topology, and its logic underpins many of the algorithms implemented in modern computer algebra systems like GAP and Magma. These systems now perform in fractions of a second calculations of a complexity that would have been unthinkable in the 1920s, yet they operate on the very principles that Reidemeister and Schreier laid down. This foray into the depths of abstract algebra demonstrates the essential character of Reidemeister's mathematical thinking. His work consistently sought to build bridges from abstract definitions to concrete, calculable realities. The same intellect that identified the three fundamental moves governing the physical manipulation of a knotted cord also devised the formal, step-by-step procedure for dissecting the anatomy of an abstract group. He supplied the machinery for moving from the holistic description of a mathematical object to a detailed understanding of its constituent parts. This profound contribution to the algebraic toolkit of mathematics secured his place as a principal architect of combinatorial group theory, a field flourishing at the intersection of geometry and algebra. His life's work was a testament to the power of rational inquiry to impose order upon complexity, a conviction that would soon face its most severe test, not in the tidy world of theorems and proofs, but in the chaotic political landscape of 20th century Europe. The conviction that rational inquiry could impose order upon complexity, a principle that animated Reidemeister's entire mathematical career, was destined for a profound and brutal confrontation with the history of the 20th century. The elegant, self-contained world of knot invariants and group presentations, offered no defense against the rising tide of political irrationalism that swept through Germany in the early 1930s. The intellectual climate, once a source of strength and collaboration for the Göttingen School and its affiliates, grew toxic. The ascent of the Nazi regime brought with it a state-sponsored hostility towards abstract thought, which was often denigrated as a Jewish or cosmopolitan corruption of a supposedly pure German science. This ideological assault created an environment where intellectual integrity itself became a liability. For Kurt Reidemeister, this was a period of existential trial. His personal and professional life placed him directly in the path of the coming storm. His wife, Elisabeth Itzenplitz, was a respected photographer and intellectual in her own right, and she was of Jewish descent. Their marriage, a partnership of intellect and affection, became a political fact, a symbol of the very cultural synthesis the new regime sought to eradicate. His own intellectual temperament, grounded in logic, clarity, and a deep respect for the international community of scholars, was fundamentally incompatible with the dogmatic and mystical tenets of National Socialism. His character, forged in the rigorous pursuit of truth, left little room for the kind of moral and intellectual compromise that the era began to demand of its academics. The decisive moment arrived in 1933. The regime enacted the so-called Law for the Restoration of the Professional Civil Service, a blandly named piece of legislation with a devastating purpose: the systematic purge of Jews and political opponents from all government positions, including university professorships. Reidemeister, then a full professor at the University of Halle, made his opposition to the regime clear. He refused to swear the required oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler, an act of profound personal courage in a climate of escalating fear. The consequences were swift and predictable. He was summarily dismissed from his post, his career abruptly severed by the state he was expected to serve. This act cast him out of the mainstream of German academic life, forcing him into a state of precarious uncertainty. He eventually found a new, though diminished, position at the University of Marburg. This move initiated a period of what German intellectuals would come to call innere emigration, or inner emigration. It was a strategic retreat from the public sphere, a withdrawal into the sanctum of private thought and scholarly work as a means of survival and resistance. While professionally marginalized and under constant scrutiny, these years were not intellectually fallow. On the contrary, the surrounding crisis of reason provoked in Reidemeister a deeper turn towards the philosophical foundations of his own discipline. Stripped of the full apparatus of his professorship, he confronted the fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge, truth, and scientific certainty that the political catastrophe had thrown into such stark relief. It was during this challenging period in Marburg that he produced his most significant philosophical work, a book published in 1938 titled Die exakten Wissenschaften und die Philosophie, The Exact Sciences and Philosophy. This text was far more than an academic exercise. It was an intellectual counter-statement to the prevailing ideology. In it, Reidemeister engaged directly with the ideas of the Vienna Circle, the group of philosophers and scientists like Moritz Schlick, Rudolf Carnap, and Otto Neurath, who were pioneering the school of logical positivism. This intellectual alignment was itself a quiet act of defiance. The Vienna Circle was a primary target of Nazi scorn, its members scattered into exile, its work condemned as the epitome of decadent, soulless intellectualism. Reidemeister's decision to engage with their project was a clear signal of his allegiance to a tradition of enlightened critical rationalism. Within the book, Reidemeister articulated a sophisticated view on the nature of mathematical and scientific truth. He explored the relationship between pure formalism, empirical observation, and philosophical interpretation. Drawing on the legacy of Hilbert's formalism and the insights of the positivists, he argued for a form of conventionalism, particularly in geometry. The axioms of Euclidean or non-Euclidean geometry, he contended, are not divine revelations or immutable laws of nature. They are, in essence, definitions, foundational choices or conventions upon which we build logical systems. The choice between them is not a matter of absolute truth, but of utility and coherence in describing the physical world. This perspective championed a vision of science as a dynamic, human-constructed enterprise built on reason and evidence, a stark contrast to the regime's insistence on absolute, racially determined, and unchallengeable truths. There is a certain historical irony in a mathematician living under a totalitarian system obsessed with immutable destiny, developing a philosophy where even the foundational truths of space are a matter of reasoned, pragmatic choice. The end of the Second World War brought both devastation and an opportunity for renewal to Germany. For those like Reidemeister who had maintained their integrity, the post-war period brought a new kind of responsibility. His principled stand against Nazism, which had cost him his career, now endowed him with immense moral authority. He was immediately called upon to help lead the monumental task of rebuilding a credible and free German university system from the ashes of the Third Reich. He served as rector of the University of Marburg in the immediate aftermath of the war, overseeing the difficult process of denazification and the re-establishment of academic standards. His commitment to educational reconstruction continued with his involvement in one of the most significant academic projects of post-war Germany, the founding of the Free University of Berlin in 1948. Located in the western sectors of the divided city, the university was explicitly founded on principles of academic freedom, in direct opposition to the politically controlled Humboldt University in the Soviet sector. Reidemeister's role in this endeavor was emblematic of his life's trajectory. The very principles of intellectual honesty and rational inquiry that had made him an outcast in 1933 now made him a foundational figure in the creation of a new democratic academic culture. This profound engagement with the political and ethical dimensions of scholarship provides the essential human context for understanding his purely mathematical achievements. His life demonstrated that the quest for clarity and rigor is not confined to the abstract realm of symbols. It is a moral imperative with tangible consequences in the world of human affairs. The principled stand that animated his contributions to the Free University of Berlin, a commitment to reason as a shield against ideological fervor, finds its purest mathematical echo in the enduring vitality of his earliest topological work. The intellectual architecture he designed in the 1920s, intended to bring order to the chaotic world of knots, proved to be far more robust and consequential than even he might have imagined. Its ultimate vindication arrived decades later, with the explosion of modern knot theory in the 1980s and 90s, a revolution that was built directly upon the bedrock of his fundamental insights. The central problem for topologists had evolved. The challenge was now to discover and validate a new class of powerful algebraic tools, the knot polynomials, which could assign to each knot a unique algebraic expression, thereby providing a far more nuanced signature than simple numerical invariants. The discovery of the Jones polynomial in 1984 by Vaughan-Jones, followed by the more general Helmsley-PT polynomial, named for its independent discoverers, marked a watershed moment. These were not mere curiosities, they were computational engines of extraordinary power, capable of distinguishing knots, like the left and right-handed trefoils, that had confounded simpler methods like the Alexander polynomial. Yet with this new power came a profound question of logical integrity. These polynomials are calculated from a specific two-dimensional projection or diagram, of a knot. Since a single knot can be represented by infinitely many different diagrams, how could one be certain that the resulting polynomial was an invariant of the knot itself, and not merely an artifact of the particular drawing chosen? The entire enterprise rested on proving this invariance. The mechanism for that proof was, and remains, the three Reidemeister moves. The logic is as elegant as it is powerful. Any two diagrams of the same knot can be transformed into one another through a finite sequence of these three elementary manipulations. Therefore, to prove that a calculated quantity is a true knot invariant, one must demonstrate that its value remains unchanged after the application of each of the three moves. The Reidemeister moves became the crucible in which the validity of every new polynomial invariant was tested. The intricate calculations involving skein relations, state sums, and quantum field theory, which generates these sophisticated algebraic objects, all culminate in a final decisive test, invariance, under the Reidemeister moves. His framework provided the logical syntax for the entire language of modern knot theory. It established the absolute standard of proof, transforming what could have been a collection of computational recipes into a coherent and rigorous mathematical theory. His work ensures that when a physicist uses the Jones polynomial to model particle behavior, or a biologist uses knot theory to understand DNA entanglement, the underlying mathematics is sound, its conclusions invariant and reliable. This legacy of foundational clarity extends into the very style and texture of his mathematical practice. Reidemeister was a central figure in the German school of combinatorial topology, which favored a direct, almost tactile engagement with geometric objects through their decomposition into simpler countable components. This approach stood in some distinction to the more abstract, set-theoretic methods gaining prominence elsewhere. His writing, particularly in his influential textbooks like Knot Theory and Einführung in die kombinatorische Topologie, is a model of pedagogical precision. He possessed a gift for presenting complex ideas with a transparent logical structure, stripping away unnecessary abstraction to reveal the essential combinatorial or geometric core of an argument. This commitment to what the Germans call Anschaulichkeit, or intuitive clarity, shaped the thinking of generations of students and mathematicians. His work provided a blueprint for how to think about topology, not as a sea of abstract definitions, but as a discipline grounded in concrete problems, rigorous constructions, and lucid exposition. Ultimately, to grasp the full measure of Kurt Reidemeister's intellectual contribution is to recognize the unifying principle that weaves through all its diverse threads. From the classification of knots to the structure of groups, from the foundations of geometry to the philosophical critique of science, his life's work was a singular and relentless pursuit of exactness. This quest for what is rigorously defined, logically sound, and unambiguously expressed was the core of his intellectual identity. In the tangled loops of a knot, he sought the finite set of moves that govern their equivalence. In the complexities of a group, he sought the minimal set of generators and relations that defined its structure. In the philosophical discourse of his time, he championed a vision of knowledge grounded in clear, verifiable principles, a stark rebuttal to the murky irrationalism that had consumed his nation. His career demonstrates that the cultivation of intellectual clarity is a profound moral and political act. The same habit of mind that allowed him to untangle a mathematical problem equipped him to see through the deceptions of a totalitarian ideology. The insistence on rigor was his defense against both mathematical ambiguity and societal chaos. Kurt Reidemeister's story is therefore one of intellectual integrity in its most complete sense. He was a mathematician who saw his discipline not as an isolated game of symbols, but as a paragon of the rational inquiry upon which a free and sane society depends. His life's work stands as a profound demonstration that the search for what is combinatorially true, algebraically sound, and philosophically clear is in the final analysis a single, unified human endeavor.